The empress was born with the destiny of a phoenix, the sole object of the emperor's affection in the harem. After becoming pregnant, she sought to secure her position by offering one concubine after another to the emperor's bed, only to brutally kill them afterward. And I was next. I wanted to live, no matter the cost. On the night I was to serve the emperor, I did everything in my power to make him call for water 7 times. Welcome to my channel. If you like this story, please click to subscribe. There are more wonderful stories waiting for you to listen to. Chapter 1. The prophecy said, when the phoenix gives birth, a golden age will dawn. The empress was the one and only phoenix-born woman, destined for glory from birth. The emperor cherished the empress, promising her a lifetime of devotion and even keeping the harem empty for her. Soon, the empress became pregnant, as the world eagerly awaited the birth of the phoenix child, who would usher in a golden age. A palace maid named Shuangwen was hurriedly carried out of the cunning palace. Her arms, covered in white cloth, were stained with blood and bruises. Everyone said that the emperor and empress were deeply in love, a tale worthy of praise. But no one knew that since the empress became pregnant, she had been selecting palace maids to send to the emperor's bedchamber to prevent him from taking new concubines. Concubines often had powerful families backing them, making them difficult to deal with. But palace maids were worthless lives, easily killed by the empress as if they were ants. Without exception, all the palace maids sent to the emperor's bed died mysteriously shortly after serving him. On the 7th day after Qiu Shuang's tragic death, the eunuch Fu Quan, who served the empress, came to the imperial workshop. Fu Quan held a set of palace attire and jewelry, glaring at me with a forced smile. "Girl, you're in luck." My hunched figure trembled involuntarily. Finally, it was my turn. I was a palace maid in the imperial workshop. I had no rank or status, and my position was lowly. I was well aware that palace maids had died after serving the emperor, but I had chosen to ignore it, clinging to a false sense of hope. I was just a lowly palace maid. How could I possibly influence the empress? Besides, I was about to leave the palace. I had entered the palace at 13 and had spent every day walking on eggshells, carefully trying to discern the intentions of those above me, afraid that the slightest mistake would cost me my life. After 12 years of endurance, I was finally nearing the age of 25, when I could leave the palace. But just as I thought I was about to break free, the hope for the rest of my life shattered suddenly. In the Qianqing Palace, the candlelight flickered. The new palace attire I wore was ill-fitting, and I buried my head, clutching my hands tightly. Though I had never known the ways of the world, I had once dreamed of leaving the palace, finding a husband, and living an ordinary life like other women. Alas, such a humble wish was now impossible. The emperor approached, bending down to inhale the scent at my neck. How fragrant! The unfamiliar scent of a man sent a shiver down my spine. A few days earlier, I had accidentally bumped into the emperor while walking through the palace corridors. As I stepped aside to bow, some perfume powder had stuck to my hands. It was the emperor's offhand remark. "How fragrant!" That was overheard by a eunuch and reported to the empress. A casual remark from a man of power had the power to shatter my life. The curtains closed around me, and the silk curtains fell away. I felt like a lone boat, nearly shattered by a storm. Tears blurred my vision, and my clenched palms left deep red marks on my skin. Gazing at the swaying canopy, I thought despairingly, "These thick palace walls, will I ever escape this place?" Afterward, I was taken to the cunning palace. As a lowly palace maid, I was unworthy of sharing the emperor's bed. I knelt in the courtyard, my knees aching from the protruding flower-patterned bricks, my body trembling from the pain. It was late, but the empress, pregnant and restless, could not sleep. She sat high on the throne, listening to the palace attendants report the details of the emperor's bedchamber. When she heard that the emperor had called for water 7 times, her phoenix-like eyes darkened, and her gaze toward me was icy cold. "You insolent fox! 7 times? How daring!" The empress was already impatient, and now her anger boiled over. She grabbed the soup bowl beside her and hurled it at me. She was the Phoenix Princess, born with a noble destiny, cherished by the people. The tale of the emperor and empress's loving relationship was widely celebrated among the people. The empress and I had always been worlds apart. Now, the favor that was solely hers had been usurped by a lowly servant like me. How could she tolerate it? But the empress had forgotten that it was she who had sent me to the emperor's bedchamber in the first place. Shards of porcelain flew everywhere, cutting my arms and leaving them covered in blood. The empress impatiently tapped the table. "Are you all dead yet? What are you waiting for?" No sooner had she spoken than eunuch Fu Quan led several eunuchs forward, intending to beat me to death with clubs. The empress had always found it easy to kill palace maids, especially those like me who were ignorant and ungrateful. But even ants cling to life. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. Everyone in the palace knew that the empress was arrogant and stubborn, and after becoming pregnant, she became even more irritable and impatient, often beating and scolding the palace maids to vent her anger. The imperial medical office had prescribed medicine, but the empress refused to drink the bitter medicine, and the palace maids did not dare to persuade her, for fear of bringing disaster upon themselves. "Your Majesty, please calm down. Please calm down." I humbly begged for mercy, hurriedly presenting the perfume box from my bosom. This servant can blend perfumes and alleviate the empress's pregnancy-related irritability. "Please spare my life." The box emitted a faint fragrance, which the empress initially looked down upon. But when the lid was opened, a delicate fragrance wafted out, as delicate as orchids. The queen's chest felt a little less stuffy. She raised her eyebrows and took the incense box from the eunuch. This worthless servant girl is not completely useless. Aside from her cunning ways, the queen's delicate phoenix eyes lowered slightly, and her mood visibly softened. She changed her mind and decided to spare my life for now. It wasn't because the queen was kind, but because I was useful to her. Before I could kneel to express my gratitude, she shot a glance at Fu Quan. Immediately, a wooden stick came down, striking my abdomen repeatedly with force. "Death may be spared, but punishment must be endured. You must suffer to learn your lesson. Do you agree?" The empress played with the perfume box I had given her, enjoying my suffering as if she were a noble deity looking down on the mortal world. I curled up in agony on the ground, my jaw forced open by Fu Quan, who poured the foul-smelling medicine down my throat. It was a potent abortion potion, causing excruciating pain as if my internal organs were being torn apart. The empress spared my life, but she intended to sever my ability to ever become a mother. After all, she was the most honored phoenix-born woman. Only she was worthy of bearing the emperor a prince and ushering in a golden age. A warm flow surged from my lower body, staining my pale palace robes with blood, a sight that was particularly jarring. I was weak and exhausted, but my eyes remained fixed on the empress on the high seat. At that moment, the incense pearls in the box seemed to sense something, and a faint red hue began to seep out. The empress couldn't resist reaching out to touch them, her fingertips brushing against the damp heat. She wiped her hands in disgust and tossed the incense box to the ground. "This incense is defiled. Prepare a new box for me." My abdomen twisted in agony, and I struggled to bow in obedience. As I lowered my head, I secretly curled my lips into a smile. The empress had ruled the harem with absolute power for years, making life and death decisions with unwavering resolve. I was the first palace attendant to survive her cruelty, only because I was still useful to her. Therefore, before my injuries had fully healed and I could barely walk, I hurriedly crafted a cone of incense and sent it to the queen's chambers. The incense box and beads are merely for convenience, their calming effects pale in comparison to burning incense. I bowed my head humbly and lit the incense cone, placing it in the animal-shaped incense burner. The empress did not even glance at me, idly fiddling with her armor as she casually remarked, "You seem quite diligent. Did you perhaps poison the incense?" I was so frightened that I immediately knelt down and pleaded, "I swear on my entire family, I would not dare. Your Majesty was born with the destiny of a phoenix and is admired by all. It is my good fortune to be able to serve you." The empress's gaze fell on my trembling shoulders. "I'm sure you wouldn't dare." A few light taps were enough to scare me, and she felt even more at ease. The empress did not know that my entire family had starved to death during a famine. In truth, the empress had once been an ordinary peasant, born in the countryside and raised in the streets. But after ascending to the throne as the Phoenix Princess, she not only banned all discussion of her origins within the palace, but also began to trample on everyone else with utter disregard. Due to her jealous nature, the emperor kept the harem empty. Because she couldn't sleep with the emperor during her pregnancy, she ordered other women to offer themselves. Because she was the emperor's favorite, any concubine who dared to displease her would be killed without mercy. She had transformed herself into a powerful figure, believing that every favor from the emperor was a gift from heaven. We, the lowly servants, had neither a good destiny nor prophecies to protect us. If we died, so be it. What was there to regret? The fragrant smoke drifted gently, filling the room with a subtle aroma. The empress leaned against the beauty bed, taking a brief rest. I gazed at the delicate smoke trails, and inspiration struck me. Having served in the palace for 12 years, I had witnessed the schemes of the harem. How could I dare to use poison? I had merely been making incense without rest. Nothing more. After the imperial physician confirmed there was no poison, my incense burned day and night in the cunning palace. As the scabs on my body began to fall off, I delivered the pregnancy-nourishing incense even more diligently each day. I carefully adjusted the quantities of each spice according to the empress's preferences and the changing seasons, all to please her. I attended to the empress until she was physically and mentally at ease, and her belly grew larger each day. It is commonly said in folk tales that a pregnant woman carrying a male fetus will become ugly. But the empress remained as fair as ever, with a radiant complexion and an ethereal demeanor, even more beautiful than before her pregnancy. The emperor cherished the empress even more than before, often rushing over to accompany her after handling his affairs. Behaving like a dutiful husband, his gaze occasionally swept over me, kneeling in the corner, but he showed no reaction. So quickly, he had forgotten me. It wasn't the emperor's fault. Over the past 2 months, my complexion had grown increasingly sallow and dark, and my body had become gaunt and emaciated. It was as if something had been silently draining the life force from me. The empress never valued the lives of her palace attendants. The slightest mistake could result in a beating or even death by clubbing. The duties in Cunning Palace were arduous. And after another 2 months, I became the person closest to the empress. Aside from Fu Quan, when the empress was in a good mood, she would casually mention rewarding me, like a generous master rewarding the best-behaved dog. After me, more palace maids were sent to the emperor's bedchamber. One afternoon, Dongqing, a palace maid assigned to sweep the imperial garden, was dragged into the Cunning Palace, her chin held down, and forced to drink an abortion potion, all because the emperor had praised her appearance as spready while admiring the flowers. Seeing her trembling like a dying cat or dog, the empress sneered. "Such a worthless creature dares to disturb me?" Such a worthless concubine was not worth her trouble. She usually had Fu Quan dispose of them. As for the eunuchs who couldn't be men, they wouldn't miss such an opportunity. After all, these were women who had been enjoyed by the emperor. Even if they were physically impaired and couldn't fulfill their duties, they still wanted to taste their flesh. Since they were going to die anyway, they might as well hand them over to the eunuchs to be toyed with and tortured before their deaths. Upon hearing this, Fu Quan's eyes lit up, and he couldn't hide the lecherous smile on his lips, like a hyena waiting to pick at leftovers. Just as he was about to drag Dongqing away, I spoke up first. Your Majesty, I have been making incense for the Empress recently and need some flowers and herbs. Dongqing has been serving in the Imperial Garden and knows many plants. Earlier, the Empress mentioned rewarding me with something. Why not give Dongqing to me instead? We can both assist the Empress in making incense. The Empress dismissed the suggestion with disdain. Very well. You may have her. In the past, I had also ignored others' suffering. Now that I had experienced the pain of the whip myself, I wanted to help someone else who was stuck in the same muddy situation. As I helped Dongqing up from the ground, I didn't notice that Fu Quan was looking at me with a cold, poisonous gaze. The next day, before I could even step through the gates of the Queen's palace, I was suddenly grabbed by the mouth and dragged into a corner. It was Fu Quan. Warn you, don't think you can use such petty tricks to compete with me in front of the Empress. Instead of worrying about others, think about your fate once the Empress gives birth to a prince. My body grew weaker, and I could only let Fu Quan choke me. His rough fingers traced along my neck, inch by inch down to my collarbone, his eyes blazing with hatred and greed. When the time comes, you'll show us how you served the Emperor so well that he called for water 7 times in one night. Won't you? His foul breath tickled my ear. Sickening and terrifying. I struggled to stop Fu Quan's filthy hands. Master, rest assured. I know my place. I knew exactly what he meant by end. After the Empress gave birth, the pregnancy-preserving incense would be useless, and I would be kicked aside, then ravaged by these eunuchs like starving dogs. But I had never worried about that. The imperial physicians came to the Queen's chambers daily to take her pulse, all reporting that the fetus was healthy. Only I knew what she truly carried within her. The Empress was of noble birth, a rare phoenix-born woman destined for greatness. The prophecy stated that when a phoenix-born woman gives birth, a golden age would dawn. From the moment the Empress conceived, the entire realm held its breath in anticipation. The Empress went into labor 2 months earlier than expected. On that day, the people of the imperial capital poured out of their homes and gathered outside the palace in devout anticipation. The Emperor, wearing a 12-tiered crown and imperial robes, led the officials in sacrificing at the ancestral temple. On a high platform carved from white marble, the Emperor delivered a passionate speech, listing his achievements since ascending the throne. He asked the ancestors of past generations and all the gods and Buddhas to bear witness that the 3 members of his family would soon be honored, receive the congratulations of all officials, and enjoy the worship of the people. Together, they would usher in the prosperous era foretold by prophecy. The Emperor stared intently at the palace road ahead. That was the direction from which the eunuch bearing the news would come. Red brocade was spread out on the ground, extending all the way to the front of the cunning palace. As everyone's gaze was fixed on the cunning palace, I remained in the imperial workshop. The incense burners around me were filled with incense I had personally blended for myself. I was now so weak I could barely hold myself up, lying on the chair and gasping for breath, as if I might die at any moment. Sister, Dongqing, who had been waiting outside, rushed in. Through the white smoke, I saw the last person I wanted to see at that moment. Fu Quan was not attending the Empress at that moment. He had come to the imperial workshop. He was clearly overjoyed, reeking of alcohol, and began shouting as soon as he entered. The Empress is about to give birth to a son. You palace maids who have slept with the Emperor, are you afraid? Are you afraid? You never respected us before, but today you'll have reason to cry. Fu Quan's joy was evident on his face. Seeing my weakness, He stumbled forward, grabbing my clothes, intending to humiliate me. Why aren't you moving? Why don't you show us how you crawled onto the dragon bed and do it to me? If you serve me well, perhaps I can ask the Empress to spare you a proper burial. My frail body was too weak to struggle. Let go of my sister. Dongqing grabbed the stone pestle used for grinding incense and held it across her chest, trying to stop him. Fu Quan was completely unafraid. Come on. If you have the guts, hit me on the head. If you dare to harm me even slightly, you'll all be torn to pieces. Fu Quan grinned wickedly, utterly unrestrained. Dongqing was terrified, and her grip on the pestle slowly loosened. At the same time, footsteps echoed down the long palace corridor. Step by step, the sounds reverberated in the emperor's heart. He had suppressed his desires for years, waiting patiently, and now he could no longer contain himself. Disregarding etiquette, he quickly descended the steps to greet the eunuch who was coming forward. How is it, my imperial son and empress? The eunuch who had delivered the message was pale and did not dare to raise his eyes. He kowtowed heavily on the ground, his body shaking like a sieve. Your Majesty, the Empress. The Empress is well, but what she gave birth to is not. What is it? Speak! The Emperor grabbed the eunuch by the collar. It's not a child. It's a pool of pus. The midwife and the imperial physician saw it with their own eyes. Your servant would not dare to deceive you. What the Empress gave birth to was a pool of foul-smelling black pus. The Emperor stood frozen in place, as if struck by 5 thunderbolts. At the front of the ancestral temple, hundreds of officials looked at each other in shock, silent as if frozen by the cold. The Phoenix Princess, the Prince, the Golden Age. These sacred words that had remained unchanged for decades, along with the towering faith they had built in their hearts, collapsed completely in an instant. How could this be? How could this be? In the imperial workshop, the smoke from the incense burners suddenly grew thick, enveloping me in a white haze that lingered for a long time, almost completely shrouding me. Moments later, a hand emerged from the smoke, gripping Dongqing's lowered hand with force. Together, they raised the stone pestle and struck it viciously against Fu Quan's head. Fu Quan, his face covered in blood, stared at me in disbelief as I emerged from the smoke. You. Shoo. I placed my index finger on my lips and smiled slightly. Fu Quan, in his panic, closed his mouth forever. I extended my hand, and the once bony knuckles were now smooth and white. Somewhere deep within my body, something long dormant was awakening. We buried Fu Quan in the imperial garden, in the flower bed tended by Dongqing. Coincidentally, the roses were in need of fertilizer. After filling the grave, we climbed the artificial hill in the imperial garden and looked down at the layered palace walls and majestic halls. 2 lowly palace maids, as insignificant as dust, stood at such a height for the first time, gazing at the palace buildings they had known so well. The hall that had always loomed overhead now seemed no more than a mere structure. I reminded Dongqing, once there is blood on our hands, there will be no turning back. Dongqing looked back at me with determination. What you have to do is what Dongqing has always wanted to do but did not dare to do. Dongqing will not look back. All right. Now that we have come this far, let's not look back. After the Empress gave birth to a pool of pus, the palace was in chaos, and no one noticed Fuquan's disappearance. In the cunning palace, the foul stench lingered in the air. The Empress, pale as death, wept on the Emperor's lap. My royal son. There was clearly a royal son in my womb. There must be traitors plotting against me. They seek to end the Emperor's reign. Enraged, the Emperor ordered the Imperial Medical Bureau to uncover the truth within 3 days, or face decapitation. The imperial physicians knelt outside the cunning palace, all sweating profusely. But 3 days passed. Then another 3. And the imperial physicians searched the cunning palace almost from top to bottom. Yet they found no trace of anything. It was not the fault of the imperial physicians. After all, from the moment the empress became pregnant, everything she ate, wore, and used, including her food, clothing, and perfumes, was carefully checked and inspected by the Imperial Medical Bureau, which did not dare to make the slightest mistake. After the final investigation, the head of the Imperial Medical Bureau led the medical officials to kneel before the emperor, swearing on the lives of their entire clans. It is impossible for the empress to have had her pregnancy interrupted by poison. Please, Your Majesty, discern the truth. But how could the empress accept this explanation? It must be that the Imperial Medical Bureau is covering for one another. Kill them all and exterminate their entire clans. Have them all buried with my royal son. She issued an imperial edict, ordering all the medical officials of the imperial hospital to be imprisoned. The news spread to the former court, immediately causing turmoil throughout the court and the country. Imperial officials being imprisoned without cause was unheard of. Petitions piled up on the emperor's desk like snowflakes. The emperor, who had always valued his reputation, was forced by the pressure to release the other imperial physicians, but kept Sun, the physician responsible for the empress's pregnancy, in custody. However, in private, he tacitly allowed the empress to secretly dispose of a group of palace attendants. After all, matters within the palace walls remained unknown to the outside world. Killing those lowly servants would not tarnish his imperial prestige. That day, all the palace maids and eunuchs who had served the empress were seized by guards and forced to kneel before the gates of the cunning palace. Cries for mercy and wails echoed, but they could not move the former master within the sleeping quarters to show even a shred of mercy. When the guards came to arrest me, I had been waiting for a long time and had carefully dressed myself. It was the time when the emperor had just finished his morning audience, and the corner of the palace path outside the Qianqing Palace was bathed in the glow of the emperor's robe. I ran forward recklessly, like a frightened deer. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! The emperor stopped the guards. The beautiful woman, panicking and not knowing where to go, fell into his arms. The emperor couldn't help but lower his head and inhale her fragrance. How fragrant! I raised my head shyly, my bright eyes full of unspeakable emotions. Thank you, Your Majesty, for saving me. Half a month passed, and I grew even more beautiful, captivating everyone's affection. We seemed to have met before. See, men aren't forgetful. They only remember beautiful women. The emperor picked me up in his arms. I blushed and nodded, wrapping my arms around his neck. Half a month after the empress gave birth to a child with pus-filled wounds, I voluntarily climbed onto the imperial bed. In the days that followed, all the palace attendants who had served the empress were arrested and sent to the Ministry of Punishment. Yet even so, she remained unforgiving. The heavenly phoenix maiden had always been held in high esteem, never having fallen so hard or felt such pain. Your Majesty, our imperial son has been harmed. They've only arrested the servants of the cunning palace, the Qianqing Palace, the eastern and western palaces. All of them must be arrested and tortured severely. I am the Phoenix Princess. The Phoenix Princess who holds the fate of the empire. They dared to harm our royal son today. Tomorrow they will dare to harm the emperor. The empress, her clothes disheveled and her hair in disarray, wept uncontrollably on the emperor's shoulder. She repeatedly expressed her hatred and suffering, going on and on. Once or twice, he could still feel pity, but after 3 or 5 times, the emperor grew annoyed. Looking at the empress's sagging, sallow face, which had even developed fine lines at some point, the emperor felt a sense of disgust for the first time. Beauty fades, and love wanes. How could a face growing increasingly withered and haggard keep the promise of a lifetime of devotion to one person? A crack began to form between the emperor and the empress, and I would have to root myself in that crack. At night, I lay on the dragon bed, clutching my chest and furrowing my brows. Your Majesty, please listen to how anxious I am. The palace has been filled with malevolent energy lately, and I often cannot sleep well at night. The emperor rubbed my chest. His eyes filled with tenderness and concern. It was clear that he was deeply captivated by my current radiant beauty. Then send all the palace attendants from the Ministry of Punishment to be detained outside the palace, so that the palace may be free of malevolent energy. I gently rested my head on his shoulder. Your Majesty is so kind to me. The emperor inhaled the fragrance on my body, his voice low and seductive. What is your name? Iris. The poisonous Iris. I encountered the empress again in the imperial garden. She had just given birth. Unlike the plumpness commonly seen in women after childbirth, the empress, despite being carefully tended to, still appeared thin and gaunt, with a sallow complexion. This was in stark contrast to my vibrant and healthy appearance. When I bowed to her, the empress took a moment to recognize me. Her eyes filled with shock and anger. She then rushed forward to strike me herself. You seductive harlot! Why aren't you in the Ministry of Punishment? You dare to take advantage of my grief over the loss of my son and your own weakened state to seduce the emperor. The empress was now frail, needing support after just a few steps, and her blows lacked any real force. Yet I managed to catch her slap. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone approaching. I took the opportunity to lunge forward, falling to the ground, my pale hands leaving several bloody marks on the ground. Just a few months ago, the empress could still strike me at will, but times had changed. Ah! Someone cried out in pain. But it wasn't me, it was the emperor, who had just passed by. He hurried forward, his eyes filled with concern. Now, I spend every night with the emperor, the favorite concubine on his heart. The empress stood frozen beside him for a long time, but the emperor's gaze didn't linger on her for even a moment. Your Majesty, Yaoer is here. Yaoer has just given birth to the emperor's child. And you're abandoning me? I am your empress, the only concubine in the harem. The empress was helped up by eunuchs, lamenting bitterly. I, however, was taken by the emperor's hand and pulled into his embrace. In the past, if the empress had furrowed her brows, the emperor would have rushed over to comfort her. But now, the one who could make him show favoritism was me. A concubine's heart is like fallen flowers, while the emperor's heart is like flowing water. Moreover, the emperor's love for the empress had never been something that could withstand scrutiny. Back then, Xing Yao, with her striking beauty, appeared as the phoenix maiden foretold in the prophecy, captivating the emperor both publicly and privately. The prophecy stated that when the phoenix maiden gave birth, a golden age would dawn. The so-called golden age is the emperor's golden age. Rather than saying that the phoenix maiden giving birth is Xing Yao's honor, it is more accurate to say it is the emperor's opportunity to boast of his own achievements. The emperor has always been ambitious and self-proclaimed as a wise ruler. Thus, he married the phoenix maiden in grand style. He even emptied the harem for her, putting on a show of love for all to see. After all, waiting for a woman to give birth is far simpler than becoming a true wise ruler. Once the phoenix princess gave birth to a prince, the emperor would hold a grand sacrificial ceremony to ascend to the heavens, equaling the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. But who could have foreseen that after laying so much groundwork and enduring so much patience, the empress would give birth to a child covered in pus, utterly humiliating him. After the sacrifice at the ancestral temple, there was much debate among the people about the prophecy. Some even dared to say, the phoenix princess failed to give birth to a prince, and the prophecy has come to naught, all because the emperor is incompetent. This is a warning. a punishment from heaven. Rumors spread quickly among the common folk, and some even began to question the court and the emperor on the dragon throne, accusing him of seeking fame and glory. Back then, the beautiful phoenix princess had captivated the emperor and served as his ally. Now, Jing Yao, whose beauty had faded, had grown tiresome to him, and her status as the phoenix princess had become his weakness. Thinking of this, the emperor glanced at the empress with disgust. Since the phoenix princess could not bear a child, she would serve as a scapegoat to appease the world. Empress Jing, your conduct is unbecoming. You lack compassion and virtue, causing heaven to vent its anger and deny us an heir. You are hereby stripped of your title and demoted to a concubine, confined to the cunning palace to reflect on your mistakes. The emperor was declaring to the world that the prophecy had failed to come true, and it was all because of the phoenix maiden's moral failings, not his own. And he was still a discerning ruler. The phoenix princess's face, now pale and ashen, was streaming with tears. Your Majesty, why are you treating me this way? What have I done to deserve this? She did not understand. In the past, when she had killed so many palace attendants, the emperor had turned a blind eye. Today, she had merely pushed someone aside. Yet she was being demoted to a concubine. She did not understand that imperial grace was as fleeting as water, and men were fickle. She did not understand that the emperor's affection for her had always been motivated by self-interest. As a phoenix maiden, she had once been a tool for tormenting others, but now she had become a leash around his neck. She wanted to ask more questions, but the emperor roughly shook off her hand, clutching the hem of his robe, and embraced me, walking away. Soon after, I became Lady Li. Lady Li, as beautiful as peach blossoms, naturally endowed with beauty. The emperor even often sighed. Such a beauty has been in the palace for over a decade. Why did I not discover her sooner? Yes, I grew more beautiful with each passing day, almost unrecognizable from the once humble iris-scented maid who only knew how to make perfume. The tale of a lifetime, meant for two, was ultimately ended by me. The palace maids who had once been favored by the emperor and spared from being killed by the phoenix maiden all found their places in the palace. Among them was Dongqing, who became a talented concubine. We naturally cherished the hard-won favor and blessings bestowed upon us. So, I also gave Dongqing some perfume, with a cooling properties, the opposite of the warm perfume I have always used. I still remember the first time I served the emperor. His warm body was in my arms, and he could not resist, calling for water 7 times in one night. Now, with Dongqing's cooling perfume, the palace attendants had to run back and forth all night to bring water. The emperor has always been impatient. In the past, in order to maintain the so-called good reputation of the emperor and empress, I forced myself to restrain myself for 2 years. After Phoenix Girl became pregnant, although he could take comfort in the company of the palace maids, he did not dare to go too far. Now that he has no reservations, he naturally does whatever he wants. As for me, I only add some incense powder to the incense burner when the emperor is exhausted. Then I ask in a disappointed tone, "Is that all? Your Majesty is already tired?" Wintergreen, who served the emperor in bed, was different from me. She would only encourage him gently. Your Majesty is mighty and vigorous. How could you fail? We played the roles of the good cop and the bad cop, often coaxing the emperor to grit his teeth and say, "Help me up again and try." This absurd routine continued for months until I suddenly received a surprise. My menstrual cycle had stopped. I knew exactly what this meant. I immediately informed the emperor. He was overjoyed and granted every request I made. I seized the opportunity, claiming that I needed to dispel malevolent energies and pray for the emperor's heir, and petitioned for a royal decree to pardon the palace attendants and physicians who had been imprisoned on the Phoenix Princess's orders. For a time, Lady Li's reputation for virtue spread far and wide. But I didn't want to be a virtuous concubine. What I always wanted to be was a seductive concubine who caused chaos in the harem. A few days later, in the afternoon, a palace attendant who was serving in the outer chambers suddenly fell ill, and was replaced by a young eunuch with an unfamiliar face. After waking from my nap, I took the sweet soup presented by the palace attendant as usual and drank it all in one gulp under the watchful gaze of the young eunuch outside the door. "Your Highness, it's done!" The young eunuch rushed into the cunning palace, eager to report his success. On the beauty bed, the Phoenix Princess, whom I hadn't seen in months, looked even more haggard, her hair now streaked with gray. Upon hearing the news, she tried to clap her hands but could barely lift them. Her voice was hoarse like a night owl, her smile weak and strained. "A lowly woman like you dare to be pregnant? Only I can bear the air of the dragon." Before she could finish the last word, the Phoenix Princess suddenly clutched her abdomen and rolled off the bed in agony. At the same time, the palace doors opened. I appeared before her unharmed, standing on the flower-patterned tiles where I had knelt during my first visit to the cunning palace. I bowed my head and smiled faintly at the high position above me. "Your Majesty, it's been a long time." I raised my little finger, and the guards immediately rushed into the hall, dragging away the eunuch who had poisoned her. There was no need for me to interrogate him. The 72 tortures of the Ministry of Punishment would be more efficient. The Phoenix Maiden was now lying on the ground, trembling in pain, her forehead covered in sweat. I walked up slowly. "How does the taste of the potent abortion potion feel?" In her panic, she raised her withered face. Though she was only in her 20s, her face was already wrinkled and sagging. She moaned in agony. How could this happen? I clearly drank it. Yet it affected her instead. Didn't it? I looked down at her from above. Have you ever heard of the mother-child poison? The mother-child poison involves planting the mother poison in one person and the child poison in another. At first, the person with the mother poison nourishes the child poison host with their own blood and essence. Over time, the child poison grows within the host, sheds its fetal membrane, and eventually becomes part of the host's bloodline. Afterward, the roles reverse. The son poison begins to absorb the host's essence and blood to nourish the mother poison host. I explained slowly, pausing at the right moments to clarify. So the pus-filled water you gave birth to after 8 months of pregnancy was the son poison's fetal membrane. And what you carried in your womb was not a prince at all, but a parasite. The Phoenix Maiden stared wide-eyed in horror, struggling to utter the words. How times have changed. The Phoenix Maiden, now curled up on the ground, trembling with fear, was no different from the palace maids she had once tormented. "By the way, Your Majesty, have you forgotten the potion you personally watched me drink to prevent pregnancy? I have severed all maternal bonds in this lifetime. How could I possibly be pregnant? As for you, you should taste the potion's effects yourself." The Phoenix Maiden did not know that the poisonous insects were connected to their mothers. Once the offspring grew, they would protect their mother with all their might, inflicting the pain their mother suffered onto their host. Thanks to the Phoenix Maiden, the excruciating pain I endured a year ago was now being returned to her tenfold. As the potion took effect, the force of the backlash grew increasingly fierce. The Phoenix Maiden began to writhe in agony, unable even to utter a moan. One by one, hideous scars emerged from beneath her skin, slowly creeping up her neck and across her face. A foul-smelling, blackish-red fluid gushed from her lower body, creating a grotesque and unsettling scene. I knelt down beside her and whispered in her ear. "Qiu Shuang, Kai Wei, Chui Er, Fu Ling, Yu Xia. Do not forget these palace maids you killed." After palace maids Qiu Shuang died, her older sister Qiu Yu, who worked in the palace, found me when she learned I was about to serve the emperor. The sisters were from the Miao region, Yu secretly took the blood of several palace maids who had been killed but not yet smuggled out of the palace, mixed it with her own heart's blood, and used it to cultivate a mother and child poisonous insect. Yu sacrificed herself as an offering, and before dying, she handed the poisonous insect to me, who was about to serve the emperor. She could no longer avenge herself, but I could. Before she died, Yu's eyes were filled with resentment and hatred. Why can the empress kill people at will without facing any punishment? Why is she the phoenix, and we are mere ants? I will make those who sit high above pay for their deeds. I will make them know how terrifying an ant's revenge can be. Yanwei. Don't spare her. Don't spare them. That day, as I held Yu's lifeless body, I finally lost my fear. I took the hairpin from the bedchamber jewelry bestowed by the Phoenix Maiden, and the sharp pain cut through my wrist. The mother worm crawled into my body along with the blood. The daughter worm, however, I placed into the perfume box. That night, the warmth the Phoenix Maiden felt on her fingers was not my blood, but wrapped around the baby worm, the resentment of the palace maids who had died unjustly. After that, I went to the cunning palace every day, tirelessly preparing incense, not to curry favor with the empress. Instead, I used the incense as a lure to help the baby worm settle in the palace and grow safely. As for what happened later, when the Phoenix Maiden gave birth, she gave birth to a child. The child was not a prince, but the Zigathat had fused with her blood within her body. The truth was revealed, and the former empress, now Jingfei, was utterly despairing. After a moment, she seemed to think of something and struggled to crawl to my feet. I was wrong. Please. Please save me. I don't want to die. I don't want to die yet. Her once flower-like beauty had withered away, now filled with the scent of death and decay. Her once sharp phoenix eyes were now cloudy and pleading, tears streaming down her face as she looked at me. Look. Even the phoenix, once so high and mighty, is crying. She is begging for mercy like a dog, crawling on the ground. The excruciating pain in her abdomen and the constant gnawing of the poisonous worm day and night had reduced her to a hollow shell, a walking corpse. I reassured her. You are the Phoenix Maiden destined by heaven. Killing a Phoenix Maiden brings misfortune. Moreover, we are bound by the parasite. As long as you live in agony, I can be at ease. Isn't that right? The tortures endured by those innocent palace maids before their deaths should be slowly savored by her over the course of her entire life. Son. The imperial physician who had once served the Phoenix Maiden and was unjustly imprisoned, was summoned by me to examine her. Son, of course, knew how to repay a debt of gratitude. He reported to the emperor that my fetus had been lost, and added a final blow by saying it was supposed to be a boy. The emperor was furious and ordered the Phoenix Maiden to be banished to the cold palace, to be beaten with a rod 20 times every 5 days. As punishment for her sins, the once praised tale of the emperor and his concubine, which had been sung in the streets just a year ago, had now become a laughingstock. I know you haven't had it easy either. The emperor spoke softly, trying to comfort her, his voice filled with tenderness. He did not know that, no matter how difficult things were now, they were still better than before. For in the cold palace, there were already people waiting for the Phoenix Princess's arrival. They were carefully selected by me, palace attendants who would inflict torture every 5 days. And they were also the relatives, old friends, and fellow villagers of the palace maids she had once harmed. They were naturally more skilled than I was, and they would make the Phoenix Princess taste the agony of being unable to live or die. It is said that in recent days, the Phoenix Maiden has often raved like a madwoman. There are worms inside my body. Help me remove the worms from my body. Rumors began to spread throughout the palace. The Phoenix Maiden is actually a witch. Such an evil person deserves to be thrown into the filthy ditch of the cold palace to rot in the darkness. The Phoenix Maiden has become a witch. It is the calamity she deserves for her unworthy position. However, my revenge did not end there. Just as I had lost my son, the palace was empty, and the emperor had already ordered the selection of new concubines to fill the harem. In the past, he had pampered the Phoenix Maiden, wasting so much time. Now, in his early 30s, he has no children. The emperor is panicking. I also took the opportunity to increase the dosage of the medicine in the incense used by myself and Dongqing. The Phoenix Maiden has indeed done evil. But can the emperor remain unscathed? The emperor has always been skilled at hiding his desires behind the Phoenix Princess's misdeeds, reaping the benefits without a second thought. If the Phoenix Princess is a vicious dog baring its teeth, then the emperor is the master hiding behind the dog. It is his indulgence and leniency that indirectly led to the tragic deaths of countless palace maids. Therefore, from the very beginning, he has been a part of my revenge. The fragrant medicine on my body is warming, while the one on Dongqing's is cooling. When used alone, neither is harmful. But the emperor spends day and night with us, without restraint. The alternating cold and heat, the clash of temperatures, would gradually drain even the strongest body of its vital energy. With such a weakened body, how can he expect to have children? Looking at the faintly darkening mark between his eyebrows, I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. He might not even be able to save his own life. Sun, the imperial physician, reported that the emperor had been indulging in the company of women recently and, to avoid spoiling his mood, had demanded aphrodisiacs from him. How could I not understand the emperor's urgent desire for an heir? Give them all to him. No heir is the greatest tragedy. The emperor is truly desperate. Upon hearing this, the emperor embraced me tightly and sighed deeply. Yanwei, thank goodness you understand me. I leaned against his chest, listening to the increasingly chaotic beats of his heart. The emperor still doesn't understand. Yanwei is poisonous. In the 9th year of Yonghe, during the late spring, that day, I was sunbathing in the courtyard when a palace attendant rushed in to report. The emperor has suffered a stroke and passed away suddenly. I picked up a cherry from the plate and murmured, "Oh, it was only a matter of time. What's there to be surprised about?" The emperor passed away without an heir, and there were no heirs in the palace. In this time of crisis, several elderly statesmen of high moral standing jointly recommended Prince Cheng as the new emperor. I had heard of this Prince Cheng. In his fiefdom, he imposed light taxes and allowed the people to rest. A feudal lord who valued the strength of his people. On the day the new emperor ascended the throne, Wintergreen and I, having no children, voluntarily requested to leave the palace to pursue spiritual cultivation. The new emperor had also heard of the matters in the harem. He specially permitted us not to be under anyone's supervision and not to report our whereabouts after leaving the palace. This was effectively granting us freedom. The carriage carried Dongqing and me out of the palace city. After many years, I finally saw the vast sky and earth again. Dongqing and I found a remote town, changed our names, and began the ordinary life we had always dreamed of. Here, there were no cumbersome palace regulations or distinctions of rank. Only clear mountains and flowing waters. And a life free from strife. Another 3 or 5 years passed, and the mother poison within my body gradually weakened. I could feel that the Phoenix Maiden, Jing Taifei, who remained in the cold palace, was nearing the end of her life. In the past, Qiuyu had never told me what the outcome would be for someone with the mother-child curse. Because when one is desperate, one acts without regard for the consequences. But now I knew. On that day, I clearly felt that a part of my body had finally found peace. The once beautiful face in the mirror was gradually returning to its original form. A wave of nausea surged in my chest. I covered my mouth and coughed violently, coughing up a clump of dark, bloody mucus that was still twitching weakly in my palm. That filthy substance, however, turned into a wisp of green smoke and dissipated in the breeze the moment the sunlight touched it. It seems that filth has no place under the sunlight. The evil thoughts in the human heart are no different. I gazed at the rising sun on the horizon, feeling that my long-dead heart had finally come back to life. Dead wood can sprout. Withered grass can regrow, the seasons change, and cycles of prosperity and decline repeat. The iris had finally welcomed its own rebirth. Afterward, Emperor Ai, a debauched and tyrannical ruler, died suddenly. The court officials welcomed Emperor Qing to the throne, changing the era name to Qianming. During the Qianming era, Emperor Qing purged corrupt officials, lightened taxes, and pacified border conflicts, driving away nomadic tribes. All industries flourished, and the empire enjoyed peace and prosperity, a period known as the Qianming Golden Age. Yet the prophecy that when the phoenix gives birth, a golden age will arrive had long been forgotten. End of the story.